Okay, afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's discussion. My name is Tony Sech, and I'm the director of the Rajawali Foundation Institute for Asia. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I have a couple of formal announcements to make before we get going. The first is that the Rajawali Foundation Institute for Asia acknowledges the land on which Harvard University sits is the traditional territory of the Massachusetts people. We also recognize the continuing presence of the neighboring Wampanoag and Nipmuc nations. I'd also like to thank our co-sponsor, the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies at Harvard University, and Director Mark Wu is here with us today. So as people are aware, today's event is being recorded and will be publicly available on the Ash Center's YouTube channel following the conclusion. As a result of that, if you do wish to ask questions, please use the microphones which are at the back of the room so as we can pick up the recording effectively and clearly. And we'll come to that presently. Anyway, we're very lucky to have with us today our guest, the Honorable Alexander Yu, who is Taiwan's representative to the United States. He has a phenomenal record of diplomatic service, having served in many different environments. He's joined us here since the beginning of this year, right at the end of last year, as the Tah-ray Economic and Cultural Representative Office head based in the United States. Before that, he was serving to the European Union based in Brussels, and has also been Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. So obviously, in that extraordinarily brief introduction, you can see he's a person who's very well versed in dealing with diplomacy, dealing with international affairs. I would say in a not all too easy position, given many of the challenges that I'm sure we'll be talking about and discussing during the afternoon. What we're going to do is I have a couple of questions just to start off with the ambassador. And then he will make some comments, 10 minutes or so, and then we want to open it up to the floor from questions from the people who are here. So maybe let me start with your impressive array of diplomatic work. You've been in Latin America, you're in the European Union, and now the US. I guess a lot of that work must be similar, but what have you found distinctive about trying to navigate Washington and the US?
Well, Washington, without I don't know, those of you who speak Spanish, call modestia aparte, which is putting modesty aside. The United States representation is our most important post everywhere in the world. We have 120. And obviously, our relations with the United States, although lacking diplomatic recognition, is actual existential relationship. The well-being of Taiwan to exist as it is, for Taiwanese people to be able to continue voting for its president in 4 years. It has a lot to do with our relation with the United States. I'm not saying that we depend on the United States for survival, but the coordination, I'll talk about the Taiwan Relations Act later on, 45 years. Taiwan Relations Act, we celebrate 45 years of anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act because that's the cornerstone, plus the 6 assurances of how we interact between Taiwan and the United States, barring diplomatic relations. But that has been a law of the land of the United States that allows us, the United States, to interact with us in terms of culture, education, economy, even military affairs. But at the same time, it's also a sad story because a Taiwan Relations Act was needed because in 1979, the United States cut relations with the Republic of China and Taiwan. So it's also an introspection of, what's distinctive? Well, one thing I can say, such as when I was Vice Foreign Minister in Taiwan, I'm happy that I'm not in Taiwan now because one of the hardships, I don't know, there are not any congressional people here from Taiwan, but facing the legislature was a really hard thing to do in Taiwan. You had to show up for the legislature when they have committee meetings, Foreign Affairs Committee or the plenary. you have to go to go there and defend foreign affairs. At any while they were in session, we would be called up at any time and spend lots of time in there. But there is very divided stances between different political parties in Taiwan and how they view many things, including foreign affairs or cross-strait relations. But in Washington, the heartwarming thing is you go to United States Congress, and every alley where you go in Congress, either Senate or the House, you'll see Friends of Taiwan. And that's really a bipartisan, bicameral thing in the United States, is the support for Taiwan. It is very loud, very clear, and very, as we described it many times, very rock solid. And that's a distinctive thing. I've been working in diplomatic posts, Ambassador Paraguay. I've been to Geneva, head of mission in Geneva, working on international organizations, and it's always very challenging because we have to fight different opinions, different views, but in the United States, it's the view on Taiwan is actually very unison. The need to help Taiwan to preserve its existing democracy, be able to defend itself appropriately, etc. So I think that would be different. But besides Latin America, besides international organizations, besides United States in Europe, actually, when I was vice foreign minister, I was also in charge of Mongolia, Russia, Mid-Asia, West Asia, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and Caribbean. So actually, I had over 100 countries responsibility. So who would have thought that one day Ukraine was going to take a large chunk of my working time? So much so that one day I told my colleague, I think I'm also in charge of Latin America and the Caribbean, isn't it? because what happened to Ukraine and Russia, the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it took a lot of time. Again, Ukraine is very good in terms of relations with the PRC, but when Russia invaded Ukraine, we saw it as another democracy under threat. So therefore, we decided to provide assistance, humanitarian assistance, to Ukraine, to the refugees, and also to the neighboring countries. Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, for that, I think I have a couple of follow-up questions. The first obvious one, from where you finished, is are the lessons in the invasion of Ukraine by Russia that you take in terms of thinking about Taiwan and Taiwan's position?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to. Ukraine is, I think, a lot of countries are learning from Ukraine, or the Ukraine issue or Ukraine situation. Can you hear me? Okay. We're learning. So is Beijing. I think the key part about Ukraine is that we can't let Russia win Ukraine, because it will be admitting that a larger power, by bullying against a smaller power, it can get around with it and can win without consequences. So helping Ukraine defend itself, it's important, and also is to let the Beijing know that if they have any thoughts on Taiwan in similar situations, they will not win, or they will not get away with it. That there will be consequences. And we know, for example, that the Beijing is studying very carefully. You have lots of people studying the economic sanctions imposed by the West on Russia because of the invasion of Ukraine. So Beijing is looking to what if the Taiwan scenario and sanctions are placed on Beijing, how can they get around it? So they're also learning, we're also learning. Obviously, battlefield tactics has, you can't imagine any future battle scenarios without a drone nowadays, because Ukraine changed that. but you also see that modern times, the warfare being leashed out in Ukraine is still half medieval, half modern. You still have to rely on mechanized or conventional machines and soldiers, full soldiers to actually get to the land and recover it et cetera, but also rely on high technology to coordinate the forces. So it's a learning experience, and we talk about asymmetric warfare. So we're learning how a smaller country defends itself against a larger one, and we're taking a lot of cues from Ukraine. Also, how the population of Ukraine assists its armed forces in defending itself against. How does the social, the society itself deploys itself in terms of war? Something they're also learning a lot from Ukraine and other countries. But yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned in Ukraine.
Yeah, you were talking about Washington earlier, right? I guess you probably must be about the happiest person in Washington, or probably the only happy person in Washington, given all the divides we see there. But related to what you were just talking about, there is now a division, obviously, as you know, in the Hill about the nature of support for Ukraine. And first, is that something that concerns you in the sense that might people then draw a parallel to continued support for Taiwan? And are you concerned that the strength of US support for Taiwan might wane somewhat as China intensifies its pressures?
Well, on the second part, that's not really a concern, because the United States, again, repeatedly has stated its commitment to the defense of Taiwan, and besides, based on, again, Taiwan Relations Act and the six commitments. As a matter of fact, the AIT chair, Laura Rosenberg, she's in Taiwan right now. It's part of the engagement of the United States government through AIT to show the support for Taiwan's democratic process. We had elections in January, and then the new president will be inaugurated on May 20th. So we have this fairly long transition process, but it's a process that we're carrying through. And the phone call that President Biden and Mr. Xi had a couple of days ago, the first thing that is being mentioned in the summary is Taiwan, and about making sure that Taiwan will have a smooth presidential transition. So again, Taiwan's U.S. commitment to Taiwan is I think fairly solid. You talk about Ukraine again. I don't want to be involved in U.S. internal politics. There is some issues, with your own borders, etc. I respect that, but again, on the part of Ukraine, our leadership has also mentioned the importance that you cannot let Ukraine fail, and that's an important message wrong message that the world will be sending, including the United States, sending to PRC.
Yeah, the thing that worries me is whether there's a real understanding within American society about the nature of Taiwan and its importance in that context. In a sense, Ukraine sort of rings bells because it's in Europe, so on and so forth. But with the question of Taiwan, for many people, I think it just seems so far away. And then becomes the question of why should we care? And so I presume that's an area of sort of outreach which becomes important for your work and your various offices around the U.S.
And one of the reasons why I'm here, and by the way, I took over our office in Washington, although I presented myself in December, but actually real work started later on in January. But one of the, as you mentioned, the outreaches is for me to cover as much of the United States territory as possible. We also have, besides our office in Washington, we have 12 other offices, one in Boston, which is managed by my colleague here, Liao, sorry. And it's important for us to let the American people know why US-Taiwan relation matters, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. Besides coming back to, again, I did come to Harvard 20 years ago, so very happy to be back in Harvard in this capacity, but also to carry the message of the importance of. But again, there's been many accounts and reviews and papers on why Taiwan matters. But if you compare to Ukraine, and not lessening the importance of Ukraine and the suffering that Ukraine is going through, but Ukraine may be the front line of democratic defense in Europe, and many countries in Europe are helping Ukraine so that they will not spill over into Western Europe. But Ukraine, as internationally, the effects of the war has not really been felt per se, because there's been more or less locally, or maybe somewhat regional in terms of European. The gas stock being that Russia sent to Europe was stopped, and gas prices were a little elevated, but there was an international effort to help Europe quit the dependence on Russian gas, and now it's fixed. But if something like Ukraine would have happened to Taiwan, the consequences are much greater than Ukraine. Taiwan may be a small place, an island. I think we're 1/3 the size of the state of Virginia. It's a small place. But we are your 8th largest trading partner, which means, in put it in context, the trade that we do with you, the United States, is larger than the trade that you do with India, or larger than the trade you do with Brazil or Italy or Netherlands, etc. So actually, we're and also the last couple of years, especially after COVID started, many people equated Taiwan with TSMC, and we have to remind people all the time, Taiwan is not just TSMC. We have other things too, but TSMC came to the limelight, and people talk about just TSMC, but one company is responsible in the production in Taiwan. 60% of the world's semiconductors are made in Taiwan by TSMC. 92% of the advanced chips, for the planes, for the rockets, for advanced chips for AI, it comes from Taiwan, TSMC too. So if Taiwan were to, for example, again, unfortunately, we had an earthquake yesterday, and TSMC plants in Taiwan, although not affected, they shut down for precautionary measures to make sure that everything was okay. But the shutdown, now they're back to 78% of the production capacity. They were just checking. But a shutdown from TSMC in Taiwan, maybe for more than 3 days, will cause chaos in the world, because remember during COVID, the Detroit GM plants in Detroit, they were manufacturing cars, but once they were out, they were putting in stadium lots because could not be sold because they had no chips. Without that chip, the car could not function. Those chips came from Taiwan. Not because, again, well, it's another story, why there was a lacking of chips. NVIDIA co-founder, Mr. Jensen Huang, who is Taiwanese, but my American friends always remind me, no, he's American now. But NVIDIA, for example, just released a new Blackwell chip, which is a huge chip. It looks like this big. And it will be the new frontier of processing. I think it's 100 times faster than the fastest chips available today. But they designed the chip, but the chip itself was made possible into a functioning, chip by TSMC also. And in the future, AI, with the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, all these machines that run artificial intelligence needs these super high, performing semiconductors, and all this comes from Taiwan. So Taiwan is relevant in terms of, so something happens to Taiwan, and what, 50% of trade, the marine route goes through Taiwan Strait. So again, things that could happen to Taiwan will affect your livelihoods because trade will stop, things will get expensive, machines won't run. So it is relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that's the message I think that would certainly resonate with many people in the States. And I mean, what you're presenting is really, there's a moral argument for support,
Sure.
which is more about systems. And of course, the current president is very much stressing this question around democracy against authoritarian regimes. But as you said, there's also a very hard pragmatic rationale here for the US economy. And one thing I've noticed is, in the region, because of many of China's actions, some of your other regional neighbors are also in many ways getting more supportive towards Taiwan, I would say, or maybe they've always been supportive, but we're getting more expressive in terms of their report. I don't know if too long, but I do have one last question I wanted to ask you, following on from your comments, before you make some comments of your own. And this relates to this question of semiconductors. And there, my question is, how important are those projected plans for developing the facility in Arizona? And, how does it strengthen your relationship with the US? But also, if it doesn't work out, could it be a problem for Taiwan?
There's been some debate even in Taiwan about whether it's smart to diversify our production. Again, I'm not TSMC, so I'm not speaking for them, but it's just the general idea, that for us to diversify our predominance in semiconductor chip production in Taiwan, which right now it is. There's some plants a couple plants in China, but they're mainly, I think, most of them are still made in Taiwan, especially the high-end ones. But TSMC decided to put a plant in Arizona, one in Dresden, Germany, and one in Kumamoto, Japan. Actually, the one in Kumamoto, Japan, which was announced later than the Arizona plant, is now already in production. And they already announced there's the expansion for the second fab in Kumamoto. The plant in Arizona, from what I know, is it was a little slow in start, but it's some of the ruffles, issues in Arizona has been cleared away, and also they are starting their second fab in Arizona. So it's a matter of again, different countries have different cultures, different sectors, industries have different. It's not that whether the labor capacity of a country is better or worse than the other. It's a matter of learning the industry's culture and way of doing things. So the plant in Arizona, it will. There's no reason why it shouldn't work. And TSMC, if they spend $40 billion on the plant, I'm sure it's going to work. And I think it's, again, different sources, but I think it's one. I don't know if it is the or at least one of the, but at least it's one of the single largest foreign investments in U.S. soil. And it means, again, for Taiwanese companies to put investments in countries where rules are followed, and international order is respected, I think it's actually a plus because we become part of the supply chain. So if a threat happens to Taiwan, actually these countries, Japan, Germany, United States, does have a lot to lose because this production chain will actually be broken. And so actually, I think, besides, as I mentioned, AI, with this advent of AI, a lot more chips will be needed. So I don't think Taiwan can produce all the AIs just in Taiwan. They will need to produce chips, close to their customers. And so there's plenty of chips to go around and plenty of fabs to be settled at other places and countries.
Yeah, I think the fact the Bank of Taiwan is also set up there in Arizona as well, I think sort of clearly shows the commitment to making that work. I mean, one of the problems, of course, is whether there's going to be enough trained engineers to get on board quickly enough, but we'll leave that aside for now. So perhaps you'd like to address us with some comments, and then we'll move to opening up for questions.
Professor Seitz and Professor Wu and all the presence, the distinguished people who are here at the Ash Center at Kennedy School. I'm happy to be back. I'm a product of JFK School, as a matter of fact, although it was briefly, I didn't get a degree here, but I was, when Taiwan government initiated a Taiwan leadership program in 22 years ago, I was on the first promotion on the first class, and I attended the senior executive fellow, which, by the way, at that time, people from Harvard went to Taiwan to do the interview, and Professor Seitz was one of the ones who interviewed me 22 years ago. So, as I was saying earlier, Harvard did good. Very happy to be back in Taiwan, in Harvard, and as a Taiwan representative to the United States. But a lot of issues that are at stake today is very sensitive because of the situation between Taiwan Straits. It's tense. And I was at the Wilson Center not long ago, and they were talking about the Taiwan problem. Taiwan problem is not being solved. And I said, well, wait a second. No, we have the Taiwan, situation which is tense. The Chinese are, sending their ships and fighter planes close to our identification zones all the time. But as you notice, also there's issues with between PRC and Japan with the Tah-ray or the tiny islands and Japanese, and then there's the issue with the Philippines, issue with South China Seas, and then there's issue with India, and also the common denominator, by the way, is the PRC. So it's not a Taiwan problem, but it's a China problem. The Chinese are the ones creating all the problems. So we are not the problem. China is the problem. So, in their Chinese, communiques when they say, you should not cross the red line. You should not cross PRC's red line, otherwise, we will get angry and we will react. But the problem is, Beijing is the one who is drawing the red line. They change the red line at their will. Remember that there used to be a invisible division at the Taiwan Straits, which both sides sort of respected. The planes and ships will not cross each other's, the medium line, the Taiwan Straits. And lo and behold, when Speaker Pelosi decided to visit Taiwan a couple of years ago, China said, from today on, there will be no longer a medium line. So what's the new normal now? They basically just shifted the line further towards Taiwan. And recently, when the election was over and the candidate that China did not desire to won, which is President-elect Lai, then decided to act up again and change one of their civilian air routes further to the medium line, and etc. So they're the ones creating the antagonistic situations, and we're not the ones being the aggressors. And at the same time, PRC, Beijing, is trying to use different narratives to try to prove that they are the rightful owners of Taiwan. For example, recently, last 6 months, a year, started using a lot about Resolution 2758, United Nations 1971 resolution, General Assembly 26, Resolution 2758. Actually, that resolution, what it did was resolve or decide who represented China's seat at the United Nations, which basically and that resolution gave it to the People's Republic of China. But it does not mention Taiwan, does not mention Republic of China at all. But PRC now uses Resolution 2758 sort of as a legal basis that Taiwan is part of the People's Republic of China, which is groundless. But they throw 2758 all the time, thinking that people actually don't read what's in 2758. It's a small paragraph. It doesn't really mention Taiwan, but they say, oh, because of that, we own Taiwan, which is false. But it's a narrative. They try to say, well, because of that, legally, we own Taiwan, and therefore, any attempts by other countries, such as the United States, to help Taiwan defend itself, you are crossing the red line, and therefore, I have the right to intervene militarily because you crossed the red line. But again, the red line is being drawn by them, not by anyone else. Made up by things that doesn't exist, such as Resolution 2758's mention of Taiwan. But our relations between Taiwan and the United States, as I mentioned earlier, is currently based on the Taiwan Relations Act, which we're celebrating 45 years of its existence. When President Jimmy Carter decided to break with Taiwan, January 1st, 1979, United States Congress came up and said, no, we can't just abandon our friends like that. There has to be something that will guarantee that Taiwan and the United States will continue to interact with each other. Although, again, the foreign relations is the president's prerogative, but the people of the United States will act on a resolution so to reassure that the relation between Taiwan and the United States will continue. So Tah-ray was enacted. So that has been the cornerstone of relations and has grown, very, very positively to what it is today. And as I mentioned also earlier, people describe our relations as rock solid. What I want to tell you about Taiwan, I think we can do it through discussions. Just minutes ago, and with Professor Saishwa already mentioned a lot of the current events on Taiwan. But one thing I will say before I finish my lines is we had elections in January 13th, where it was a very lively debate, lively campaign. There were three major contenders from three different parties, and but during the elections, we suffered a lot of attacks from disinformation, from cognitive warfare, gray zone tactics, military threats, economic coercion, etc., from mainland China. And they were trying to influence the outcome of our elections by way of this thing, even through TikTok. I don't know, by the way, TikTok is they're very focused on their target audience, and the message they send is very focused on what the message they want their target audience to receive. But so we had government agencies as well as NGOs, fact-checking agencies, private and governmental agencies, to check these things that came out on the internet and social media. And then once we detected it was false, we alerted our people immediately. And by doing so, we were able to sort of avert this massive campaign of disinformation against our electorate, which we can say was successful because at the end, the very candidate that they didn't want it to win won. The electorate in Taiwan chose President Lai elect as their future leader. But at the same time, we were gathering evidence of this campaign, of this disinformation campaign. So we gathered evidence, we analyzed it, and when we actually had a delegation come to the United States next week to Washington, D.C. to share what we experienced and share what we found and share what we analyzed to U.S. friends, different agencies, different institutions, because this year is also a very important internationally, it's a very important election year. Many countries are having elections. So United States, India, EU, and etc. They all have elections. So we happily share what we found with our friends. But I think I'll just stop at that and rather have more interactions with the audience. But thank you very much.
And so the floor is open. Please use the microphones at the back there if you're going to ask a question. While people are getting ready, two things that struck me following on from that. One is it's not so much misunderstanding in the US, but a misrepresentation, but a lack of proper understanding about Taiwan. And I think I mentioned this to you earlier. I was getting really irate watching mainstream national news in the United States of America when it kept talking about the pro-independence party, DPP. And that every time, almost. And it gives such an incorrect impression, but it just sticks with people. I think the second thing that struck me from what you were saying is, the intransigence of the mainland, in the sense that for them, there's no problem. There can't be an issue of sovereignty because it all belongs to China. And this doesn't just, relate to the question of cross-straits relations. It's with Japan, it's with Vietnam, it's with the Philippines. So for them, there's no recognition that there could be an issue around sovereignty. And related to that, I think one of the challenges that China doesn't really acknowledge agency for its own actions. That perhaps some of its own actions are creating these problems, which again makes it very difficult to deal with. But so please let us know who you are. I mean, I know who you are, but let everyone else know. And remember, a question ends with a question mark.
Ambassador, I'm Jeffrey Williams. Lived and worked in Taiwan probably 20 years plus or minus.
Okay.
So welcome to your new post. I have to ask this question. I apologize in advance.
Sure.
A lot of news about the visit by former president of Taiwan to China this week, President Ma. And so from your vantage point, sitting in Washington, what do you think the impact? He talks a lot about peace. He's trying to set this up as, I'm the good guy, I'm going to go make peace. So from your vantage point, what's the impact of that on the people you talk to in Washington and American public opinion generally? Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, ex-president, former President Ma Ying-jeou, he's a private citizen now, so he can, and after public service, there is a certain years of so we can't go to mainland China after we are under what do you call that this. I don't know what the word is, but confidentiality clauses, that so you can't go because you might reveal secrets of the state. But again, he was president, and now after so many years, he's a private citizen. He can travel to wherever he wants to go, and then, but what China PRC is trying to also the cyber attacks. The messages they're trying to push into Taiwan now, and also internationally, and also I think President Ma's visit falls into that strategy, is that Lai Ching, the president-elect, only got 40% of the votes, which means that he does not have the majority approval of the Taiwanese people. Therefore, he doesn't really have the mandate of the Taiwanese people to rule, because he has only 40%, and that therefore, and President Ma Ying-jeou, when he was president, he fostered this détente between the two sides, and they acquired truce, and there was a 92 consensus, and things were fairly well, and so maybe the Chinese are seeing him as a possible interlocutor between Taiwan and mainland China again. But I think that's a mistake, because first of all, he's a private citizen. Even within KMT party, he's saying that he doesn't really represent KMT because he doesn't really have any formal position within the KMT. But I think that's part of the strategy that they're trying to re-engage with Taiwan again. but doing it through Ma Ying-jeou, again, talking to each other, engaging is always positive, and I think we should support that, but the PRC strategy in using Ma Ying-jeou might necessarily be a good positive in terms of the Taiwanese people per se. President Ma, I see the Naito consensus, or during President Ma's 8 years, we actually lived through some peace and quiet. There was booming relations and trade, and which was, but I must stress again, I said it today, many other occasions, the final objective of the Chinese Communist Party in taking over Taiwan as part of their own, this objective has never changed. It will not change. So any consensus, any deal that you do with PRC, CCP per se, it's only a temporary thing because their ultimate objective is that it will not change. So you have detente, the diplomatic truce. It was just to let us, the Taiwanese, feel good for ourselves. Oh, things are okay now. But actually, they're just letting you lose your guard so that they will come back when the time is appropriate. Again, there's an expression in Chinese which is called "wen shui zu qinghua," which is slow cooking the frog. If you cook it too quickly, the frog will jump out and wound it. But if you cook it slowly, the frog will not know that he's being cooked alive. And that's precisely what 92 consensus actually is. And speaking of making deals with the PRC, look at Hong Kong. When Hong Kong 1997 was reverted from being a British colony to the PRC, they signed an agreement that PRC would keep Hong Kong as is for 50 years before they would do any changes. But as you know, Hong Kong quickly became, nowadays, it's just any other city in China. Under martial and this very stringent security laws, and what used to be a very shiny pearl of the Orient is not just, again, it's being stifled by the Chinese security laws and etc. So when the protests came in and the Chinese sent in troops or what we call that, military police and beat down on demonstrators and locked the protesters in jail, etc. The UK government actually made a protest to Beijing, says, wait, we have an agreement, 50 years, it's only been, 15 years or so. And the Chinese response was, let me remind you that Hong Kong is a territory of people who belong to China, so mind your own business. This is my territory now, so I do whatever I like with it. So again, making deals with PRC, I'm not very sure. But again, President Ma, I'm sure he has good intentions, but I think it's not necessarily, again, he doesn't represent government, doesn't represent KMT, he's just doing it on his own. But if Taiwan, Taipei, and Beijing were to talk to each other, I think we're open to that. President-elect Lai has also said that he's willing to talk with Beijing if needed. But again, it has to be on equal terms. We demand respect. We should be treated as equals and not as one that is below the other, which China treats us right now. We're a lower echelon. We're provincial government. We're and that's not acceptable for us.
Yeah, I'm not sure Ma Ying-jeou's actions have been actually that good for the KMT either, actually. The gentleman here, and then we have another. Oh, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your time. My name is Franklin. I'm a first-year student at HKS, and I'm a Taiwanese American. Okay. My question is about Taiwan's diplomatic allies. So there's a debate that because Taiwan has good relationships with much of the world, unofficially, like the US, Japan, European Union, it doesn't actually matter if Taiwan has formal diplomatic allies. So maybe to ask someone from MOFA will be a little bit biased, but I'm curious, what is your thoughts on this debate? You know, whether Taiwan has 12 diplomatic allies, 50 or 0, does it matter?
Well, of course it matters. I'm biased. So, diplomatic allies are important because I guess this has given us diplomatic recognition. One of the elements, the classical definition of a country is having diplomatic recognition. But besides that, also these countries have been with us, you know, during good and bad times. Some are over 50, 80 years, 60, 66 years in case of Paraguay, and they've been supporting us in the international arena, voicing our support, you know, raising, making project resolutions to support Taiwan's entrance into international organizations such as WHO, etc. If it weren't for these countries who supported us diplomatically, there wouldn't be the following support that the United States, Japan, and other European Union has joined sequentially into the same effort. So the diplomatic allies do matter, but at the same time, our relations with other countries such as United States, Japan, you know, Australia, EU, etc., has also grown stronger and more close in terms of you know, most countries have a one-China policy. United States has a one-China policy, but you get to define what that one-China policy is. It's not the same as a one-China principle as touted by Beijing, which Beijing always like to confuse the two terms into one. Even the last phone call between President Biden and Xi Jinping, the Chinese in their communique, you know, in their readout of the phone call, mentioned that President Biden abided by the Chinese, the one China principle, which is not true because President Biden said, you know, the United States stands by its traditional one China policy, which is, again, one China policy is defined by you, not by PRC, and the PRC is one China principle. It states what Taiwan is part of them, which is, again, not true. But I'm not sure that, again, would Beijing want us to have 0 diplomatic allies? I'm not that sure, because then I would say Wang Yi, the current foreign minister, is the most active pro-Taiwan independence activist. Wouldn't it be? So yeah, but diplomatic allies are important. But we are willing to develop ties with new ties, or to recover ties with former diplomatic allies. But again, we consider ourselves a force for good. We do things in proper ways, with transparency. We want to help these countries do better, you know, get better in terms of social well-being, economic development. But we will not go into this dollar for dollar diplomacy, you know, trying to match PRC's fictitious checkbook diplomacy. And I term it fictitious because what they usually offer to our former allies, to try to lure them into to their side, doesn't really come true. You know, the check, when they try to cash it in, doesn't really, you know, it's not deliverable. They promise ports and airports and dams and, you know, refineries and lots of, they promise to buy all the products, such as when Paraguay is trying to, you know, say, oh, we can buy all of your beef, you know, only one province can buy all the beef that you produce. Or in Honduras' case, before Honduras broke with us, they promised to buy all the shrimp that was produced in Honduras, which we buy a lot. We used to buy a lot. So, oh, tiny Taiwan can only buy so much. You know, huge China can buy everything everything you produce. You don't have enough shrimp to sell us because we're so big. The once they switch sides, again, for PRC, all these allies are just a pawn on the chessboard, and it's a game between Taiwan and, you know, Beijing, and they're trying to, you know, eat as many of our pawns away. And once this pawn is off the chessboard, that's the end of their interest for these countries. And we very respectfully remind our allies that they really should look hard into previous experience of other countries. Panama, when they broke relations with Taiwan, they were promised a high-speed bullet train from Panama City to David Chiriqui, which is closer to the Costa Rican border. And when President Varela, the one who broke with us, went to Beijing to collect his cash, so I'm here to President Xi Jinping gave him, so here's my, you know what he gave him? A feasibility study of the construction of a high-speed railroad between Panama, and that was the only thing he gave me. The rest is up to you. You can talk to our companies and we can find it. But again, we are ready to engage with the world and establish it, but it will be under principled, rules, and we will not be just trying to gain my recognition just because. So that's my answer. But I'm biased. Yes.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on that. I mean, one, if there are 0 points of diplomatic recognition, Wang Yi wouldn't have that much to threaten Taiwan with. I mean, one of the things, of course, in the game is, Taiwan does something it doesn't like, and they kind of threaten they're going to take another one away from you. I think the other thing, though, that's really important to your question is the more diplomatic recognition you have, the more legitimate it is to be participant in international organizations. And of course, one of the frustrations to Taiwan is, yes, it has lots of allies, it has lots of friends, but it's shut out of all those international organizations. That, I think, is a really crucial point. The gentleman here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your candor today, Mr. Representative. My name is Jonathan Wachtel. I'm a U.S. National Security Fellow. My question is about Taiwan's defense budget. Given that Taiwan's GDP ranks globally roughly number 20, and given that, as you mentioned, one of Taiwan's biggest threats would be an attack from the PRC, how might you respond that Taiwan is not spending enough? And I understand you're not part of the legislature that you mentioned earlier, but how might you respond that Taiwan's not spending enough of their own GDP on defense budgets? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Again, another lesson that we learned from Ukraine, when you asked me, is which I also want to add, is that we learned that your homeland, you defend it, you defend your own homeland, and that's what the brave people of Ukraine are doing. So in Taiwan's case, we understand very well that Taiwan, if it comes under threat, we will defend it ourselves. The fact that there's been saying, the Taiwanese are not willing to defend because it will just wait for the U.S. Marines to come, wait for the U.S. cavalry to come, and we'll just slide down and have you shed blood for us, which is some of the disinformation coming from mainland China. It's not true. We're willing to defend our own homeland, and we know that with increased threats and with increased capabilities from mainland China, the PLA is getting stronger and stronger. Actually, they're one of the strongest in the world. But we're learning about asymmetric warfare, and we are doing our best to prepare ourselves to better improve our equipment, to improve our military readiness, and to improve our reserve, to improve our whole society resilience mechanism, civil defense, etc. And we are trying to produce our own indigenous missiles and aircraft, as well as we just launched our self-made or indigenously made submarine. So. And our defense budget has been increased, throughout the years, and now it's 2.6% of our GDP. And one thing you mentioned about the legislature is that during the last campaign, in January's presidential campaign, actually all 3 parties agreed that there was need to improve our defense capabilities. At least for that, we all agree. And then the budget approving process will be another thing. As you know, it's it's a hard thing to do, but I think, major parties in Taiwan agree that we should do better or should do more on, combat defense readiness. And I think we will do what it takes, to improve. And a lot of it doesn't really show on the defense budget. For example, whole society resilience, that falls under other budgets, from the Interior Ministry or other, but we're improving our capacity. Look at examples of other countries, Europe and even in the United States, other countries, and how you prepare yourselves for these times of crisis. And that's a whole other package, which is also fairly big. But yes, we are very conscious of being able to spend enough to preserve our combat readiness, and we will do, I think, what is needed to do so. But thank you.
Well, I can't believe it. We've actually reached the bewitching hour. And I think we've seen a lot of the depth of experience from the diplomatic career. So if people would like to join me in thanking once again Representative Yu for his comments.
One thing about, again, labeling and just finish what thought is, many people label the PRC labels Lai Ching-te as a pro-independence activist. And again, President Lai-elect has said, well, I will continue the same stance as President Tsai Ing-wen in terms of foreign policy and cross-strait relations. So you preserve the status quo, peace, stability in the cross-straits, willingness to talk on equal footing with PRC mainland. But again, the labeling comes from Beijing also. Whoever he wants to label, he's that. I would say, speaking of labeling, I would say also, if you think the biggest pro-independence activist will be Chiang Kai-shek, he's the one who brought the whole government to Taiwan, and he's the one who resisted being annexed by Mao Zedong all these years. But anyway, it's a matter of preserving we went through a transformation in Taiwan, democratic process, economic process, and who we are now after 70 so years in Taiwan, and we are successful economically, democratically. We are a product of like-minded country in this promotion of democratic values, and it's working fairly well in Taiwan. People say that democratic values doesn't work well in Asia. Well, it does work fairly well in Taiwan. So we want to preserve it. And thank you, thank all our friends here and elsewhere for helping Taiwan continue to be who we are today. But thank you very much for your presence and your interest in Taiwan.